Part 1. The Garden of Perfection. In the beginning, there was silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence before a song begins. From that silence, light was spoken into existence. The stars were born. The seas began to breathe. Mountains rose like the bones of the earth, and the wind learned how to dance. Every corner of creation echoed the same truth. It was good. And in the midst of all that beauty, the Creator planted a garden. Not just any garden, but a masterpiece of divine imagination. Eden. Its rivers shimmered like liquid glass. Every tree stretched toward heaven, heavy with fruit that glowed beneath the golden sun. Flowers bloomed in colors no I had yet learned to name. The air was filled with life, the hum of bees, the rush of wings, the laughter of flowing water. Eden was not just a place, it was a presence. A world untouched by death, untouched by time. From the dust of that sacred soil, God formed a man. His hands shaped clay, but his breath gave it life. When Adam opened his eyes, he saw light for the first time. Not just sunlight, but divine light. And it filled him with awe. God walked with him, spoke with him, and taught him the language of creation. The animals gathered around Adam, each one waiting to be named. The lion bowed its head, the dove cooed softly, and the man smiled as if the entire world were his to understand. But something was missing. The garden was alive, but his heart felt the quiet ache of solitude. And so while Adam slept beneath the whispering leaves, God took a rib from his side. Not from his head to rule over him, nor from his feet to be trampled beneath him, but from his side close to his heart. When Adam awoke, eviled air, the first woman, bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh. She was radiant, not in gold or jewels, but in the reflection of divine perfection. Her eyes mirrored the same wonder that filled the heavens. When she smiled, creation seemed to hold its breath. Together, they walked the garden's paths. There was no fear, no hunger, no shame. The world itself rejoiced in their harmony. Each morning, the sun rose as a promise. Each evening, it set as a blessing. They lived in a rhythm that only love could sustain. And at the center of the garden, 2 trees grew. The first, the tree of life, shimmered like living flame. Whoever ate from it would never die. The second, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, stood in quiet mystery. Its fruit was beautiful, enticing, but forbidden. God said to them, gently but firmly, "You may eat from every tree in this garden, but not from this one. For the day you eat of it, you will surely die." It was not a threat, but a warning. Not a prison, but a boundary. The line between freedom and destruction. They did not yet understand death. They had never known pain, or loss, or absence. But they trusted. For to live in Eden was to live in trust. Time passed, though they did not measure it. The moon rose. The stars watched, and Lao grew. The garden was alive, and so were it reflections of divine image, breathing, loving, free. In Tosa days the earth and heaven were not separate. God's presence walked among them like a breeze in the trees. There was only peace, only goodness, only light. And yet, in the stillness, beyond the garden's edge, something stirred. A shadow watched. A voice, ancient, cunning, patient, waited. It could not create, only twist. It could not love, only envy. It saw their joy and despised it. It saw their freedom and plotted to corrupt it. Because where there is light, darkness always waits for a way in. And in that moment, though they could not yet see it, the first crack in perfection appeared. Not in the garden, not in the world, but in the heart of choice itself. The story of the fall did not begin with an apple. It began with a whisper. And soon the whisper would be heard. Part 2. The command and the choice. The morning mist lingered over Eden like a soft veil. Dew clung to the leaves, and the sun filtered through in golden streams. The garden was awake, alive with the sounds of creation worshiping its maker. Adam and Eve walked hand in hand beneath the canopy of trees. The air smelled of honey and fruit, the soil still warm from the touch of divine hands. Every creature they passed bowed in harmony, the lion beside the lamb, the hawk beside the sparrow. There was no fear in this world, only trust. Yet in the midst of this paradise, one command stood like a quiet boundary between life and death. The Creator had said, "You may freely eat of every tree in the garden, except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat of it, you shall surely die." It was a simple instruction, yet beneath its simplicity lay a mystery. Why would God plant something forbidden in the heart of perfection? Why place temptation within reach of innocence? The answer was hidden within love itself. Love cannot exist without choice. Obedience means nothing without freedom. And so, even in Eden, the Creator allowed choice, the power to trust, or to doubt, to love, or to turn away. Adam accepted this command without question. He was content, satisfied in his communion with God, in his labor, in his love for Eve. The garden provided everything his heart could desire. But Eve? She was curious. Her mind was alive with wonder, always searching for meaning, for the reason behind the mystery. She would often gaze at the forbidden tree from afar, its branches stretching high, its fruit shimmering like jewels in the sunlight. It seemed so alive, so inviting. The air around it felt heavy, charged with something she couldn't name. Why not this one? She once asked Adam as they gathered figs from another tree. "Every fruit here is good. Why would he make one that isn't?" Adam smiled, brushing her cheek. "Because he asked us not to, my love. That is enough for me." She nodded, but her eyes lingered. In the days that followed, her thoughts returned to that tree again and again. She wasn't drawn by hunger. She had all she needed, but by something deeper. Curiosity, the desire to know, to understand, to see beyond what was given. And perhaps, in that desire, the first faint shadow entered Eden. Not rebellion, not yet, just the whisper of why not. Each time she walked past the tree, she noticed new things. The way its fruit glowed softly at dusk, the hum in the air around it, the sense that it was somehow aware, watching, waiting, and though she didn't know it, she was being watched in return. Beyond the light of Eden, where the edges of creation blurred into shadow, something stirred. The serpent, ancient and cunning, moved with silent grace through the tall grass. Its eyes gleamed with intelligence, its voice as smooth as silk. Once, it too had known light, but pride had cast it down. Now, it waited for a chance to wound the heart of the Creator, not by force, but by persuasion. It knew it could not destroy God, but it could touch what God loved most. So it waited and watched Eve. Each day she drew a little closer. Each time she lingered a little longer, and in that hesitation, that moment of wonder, the enemy saw its opening. One afternoon, as the golden light of Eden began to fade into the hush of evening, Eve found herself alone near the forbidden tree. The wind was still, the air thick with fragrance. The fruit glistened, its skin smooth as polished glass. She reached out, not to touch, but to feel the warmth of its nerve. Then she heard it. A voice, soft, almost kind. Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Say, turn. The serpent coiled upon a branch, its scales catching the light like molten gold. Its eyes were calm, intelligent. Too intelligent? Eve hesitated. We may eat from the trees, she replied, but God said not to eat from this one, or even touch it, or we will die. The serpent tilted its head, almost amused. Die, Eve whispered. You will not surely die. Its words were smooth, slow, deliberate, for God knows that when you eat it, your eyes will be opened. You'll be like him, knowing good and evil. Eve froze. Her heart raced. The words echoed inside her like a song she almost believed. Be like him. Was that not the purpose of creation? To bear his image, to reflect his wisdom, his understanding. The serpent's voice wrapped around her thoughts. He withholds this fruit because he knows its power. He wants you innocent, dependent. But you, Eve, you could be more. Something inside her shifted. The seed of doubt had been planted. She looked at the fruit again, and for the first time, she didn't see a boundary. She saw a door. The door to knowledge, to power, to understanding the mysteries of God himself. And in that quiet moment, paradise trembled. For where there is doubt, the heart begins to wander. Part 3. The Serpent and the Seed of Doubt. The morning in Eden was unlike any other. Soft light filtered through the canopy of trees, and the garden shimmered as though the world itself was still dreaming. The fragrance of blooming flowers mingled with the sound of rippling water. Every creature moved in peace. Lions rested beside lambs, and the air hummed with quiet perfection. But somewhere, beneath that calm, something stirred. Something ancient. Something watching. In the shadows, near the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, a serpent moved with purpose. Its scales glimmered like jewels in the sunlight, and its eyes, sharp, almost human, reflected something deeper than instinct. This was no ordinary creature. It carried intelligence. It carried intent. And within it the whisper of rebellion. The serpent slithered up the trunk of the forbidden tree, curling around a branch heavy with fruit. The fruit glowed softly. Neither apple nor pear, but something that seemed to hold light itself. It was beautiful. Dangerously beautiful. Across the garden, Eve walked among the flowers, humming softly. She had wandered near the tree before, always curious but always careful. Adam had reminded her many times of God's command, "You shall not eat of it, lest you die." But today she felt something different, a tug in her chest, a subtle question she couldn't name. It wasn't disobedience. Not yet. Just curiosity. That's when she heard the voice. Soft, smooth, deceptively calm. As God indeed said, "You shall not eat of every tree of the garden." Eve turned, startled. The serpent was poised on the branch, its eyes meeting hers, not with fear, but with a knowing look. She hesitated. "We may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden," she replied, her tone cautious. "But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, 'You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die.'" The serpent tilted its head, almost amused. "You will not surely die." The words hung in the air like a spark before the flame. Eve froze. The serpent's tone was not mocking. It was confident, almost compassionate. "For God knows," the creature continued, "that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Like God, the phrase struck her like thunder. Eve's heart pounded. Could that be true? Could this fruit, this beautiful, radiant fruit, hold the key to wisdom, to understanding? She glanced back toward the center of the garden, where Adam was tending the animals. He trusted God completely. So did she, didn't she? But the seed of doubt had already been planted. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to this than they were told. The serpent spoke again, softer now, weaving words like silk. "Eve, do you not see how lovely this fruit is? Would the Creator truly forbid something so perfect if it were not good?" Her eyes lingered on the fruit. The more she looked, the more it shimmered, as if the light itself was inviting her. She could almost feel its sweetness, its promise of knowledge, understanding, power. The garden was beautiful, yes, but maybe there was something beyond beauty. Maybe God was holding something back. Eve reached out a trembling hand, then pulled it back quickly. "No," she whispered, half to herself. "He said we must not eat it." The serpent's voice deepened, persuasive now. "He said that because he knows what will happen if you do. You will awaken, Eve. You will become like him, aware, wise, infinite. Do you not wish to know? To understand?" Eve's breath caught. The thought of being like God, of knowing what he knows, was intoxicating. Her heart wrestled between obedience and desire. Was it really rebellion or discovery? For the first time, Eve began to look at the command not as protection, but as restriction. The serpent stayed silent, letting her thoughts consume her. Doubt did the rest. She reached out once more. Her fingers brushed the smooth surface of the fruit. It was cool at first, then warm, almost alive. Her pulse raced. Her hand closed around it. The serpent watched, eyes gleaming. Eve hesitated again, glancing upward as though expecting the heavens to thunder, the earth to shake, but nothing happened. The garden remained peaceful. The air still sang. She lifted the fruit closer, her reflection shimmering across its surface. It looked harmless. It looked perfect, and somewhere deep inside, a whisper urged, "Take it." Eve drew a slow breath. Then she bit. The taste was unlike anything she had ever known. Rich, sweet, overwhelming. But as she swallowed, the sweetness turned bitter. Her eyes widened. Something shifted inside her. A strange awareness, a new consciousness, and along with it, a chill. The serpent smiled. Eve stood frozen, her heart pounding in confusion and awe. And then, slowly, she turned her head toward the sound of footsteps. Adam was coming. She called out softly, her voice trembling. He saw the fruit in her hand, and something in his chest tightened. Be. Eh. She met his eyes. It's good, Adam. It opens your eyes. It makes you see? He looked at her, at the fruit, at the stillness around them. The serpent remained silent, coiled in the branches like a shadow of temptation. In that moment, Adam faced the same choice. Trust the command, or trust the one he loved. And with the same trembling resolve, he reached out, took the fruit from her hand, ate. The garden went silent. The air grew heavy. The light dimmed, slightly, but enough for them to feel it. Their eyes were opened, but what they saw was not divine wisdom. It was loss. They looked at each other, and for the first time in creation, they saw their nakedness. And with that came something the world had never known before. Shame. Part 4. The Awakening and the Shame. The taste of the fruit still lingered on their tongues, sweet, then sour, then strangely hollow. The world around them had not changed in the way they expected, yet everything felt different. The air was heavier, the colors dimmed. The song of the garden had fallen quiet, replaced by a stillness that was not peace, but unease. Adam blinked, confused. Eve, he whispered. What's happening? She looked back at him, and for the first time since she'd opened her eyes to this world, she felt exposed. Her body, once a symbol of innocence, and life now felt fragile, vulnerable. She crossed her arms over her chest instinctively. Her heart raced with a new emotion she couldn't name. Shame. Adam's gaze met hers, and the same realization struck him like a lightning bolt. His eyes darted away. Don't look at me, he murmured, voice cracking. It was a simple request, but that single moment shattered the unity they once shared. Before, they were one man and woman, reflections of divine harmony. Now, there was division, a boundary born not of God's design, but of their own choice. They scrambled to cover themselves. Nearby, a fig tree's broad leaves shimmered in the dimming light. Eve tore one from the branch, her hands trembling. Together, they stitched crude coverings, trying to hide what innocence had once made holy. But no leaf could conceal the truth. The garden, once a living symphony, now seemed to sigh in sorrow. The breeze that once caressed their faces with warmth now carried a chill. Even the animals, once when afraid, kept their distance. Then, far away, a sound broke the silence. Not the rustling of leaves, nor the call of a bird. Footsteps. Slow. Purposeful. Familiar. Adam froze. He knew that sound. It was the sound of God walking in the garden in the cool of the Digestus, as he had done countless times before. But this time, that sound did not bring joy. It brought dread. Eve's breath quickened. He's coming, she whispered. Adam grabbed her hand. Hide. They dotted behind a cluster of trees, hearts pounding. The presence drew nearer, calm yet powerful. And then, the voice. Adam, echoed softly, yet the sound carried through every leaf and branch. Where are you? The question was not born of ignorance. God knew where they were. It was a call not for location, but for confession. Adam swallowed hard. His voice trembled. I heard you in the garden. and I was afraid, because I was naked. So I hid. There it was, the first time fear had ever touched creation. Fear. In the presence of the one who had made him. God's voice remained gentle, yet carried sorrow. Who told you that you are naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? Adam's mouth opened, then closed. Shame burned in his chest. He wanted to speak, to take responsibility, but his mind grasped for escape. The woman you gave me, he said finally, voice breaking. She gave me the fruit, and I ate it. It was subtle, but in those few words, blame entered the world. Eve flinched, her heart shattering at his words. She turned to God, desperate to explain, to defend herself. The serpent deceived me, she cried, and I ate. The garden was silent again. Even the wind held its breath. And then God spoke. His voice was steady, but filled with sorrow deeper than the ocean. Because you have done this, he turned to the serpent first, whose eyes still gleamed with defiant satisfaction. You are cursed above all creatures. On your belly you shall go, and dusty you shall eat all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. He shall crush your head, and you shall strike his heel. The words echoed through time, a prophecy not only of judgment, but of redemption. Then God turned to Eve. Her eyes glistened with tears. You will bear sorrow and pain in childbirth. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. And to Adam, whose hands still trembled, because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree I commanded you not to eat. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through toil and sweat, you will eat from it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it will produce for you. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. Each word was like a wave breaking upon them, grief, realization, loss. They had not merely disobeyed a rule. They had broken a relationship. The garden seemed to mourn with them. Leaves drooped, petals fell, the streams dimmed. The light once radiant was now softer, tinged with gold and gray. God looked upon them not with wrath, but with heartache. Despite their rebellion, he still loved them. But love demanded justice, and justice demanded consequence. As the day faded, God approached them one last time. In his hands, garments made not of leaves, but of animal skin, soft, warm, durable. They realized what it meant. Life had been taken to cover their shame. It was the first sacrifice, a shadow of what would one day come. God clothed them tenderly, as a father would a child who had lost their way. And then, with a voice heavy with sorrow, he said, "The man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life, and live forever." And so, with tears that mingled with the falling rain, they were led out of Eden, at the edge of paradise. God placed mighty cherubim, angels of fire, with a flaming sword that turned every way, guarding the path to the tree of life. Adam looked back once at the garden that had been their home, their heaven. He took Eve's hand, and together they stepped into the unknown. The sky above them dimmed. The ground was cold, but beneath their sorrow, a faint spark still burnt the promise God had spoken. A seed would come, one who would crush the serpent, one who would make things right again. Part 5. The Consequence and the Promise. The gates of Eden closed behind them with a silence that screamed louder than thunder. Adam and Eve stood at the edge of a new world, one that looked familiar, yet entirely foreign. The air was colder. The soil was hard beneath their feet. The light no longer shimmered like gold, but fell pale and weary on the earth. They were still alive, yet something within them had died. Eden, the paradise of perfect communion, of endless joy and unbroken peace, was gone. The music of creation no longer sang around them. The animals, once gentle companions, now moved with suspicion. The ground itself resisted their touch, as if creation mourned its own corruption. Adam knelt, pressing his hand into the dirt. It was rough, unyielding. "It's the same earth," he whispered, "but it feels different." Eve looked to the horizon where the flaming sword of the cherubim flickered like a distant star. A reminder of what they'd lost, she reached out, instinctively. But the distance was too great. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said softly. Adam didn't answer. His silence said everything. Days turned into weeks. They built shelter from branches and leaves, learned to light fires against the night's cold, but nothing could warm the emptiness inside them. Each morning, Adam would wake before dawn, hoping that maybe the voice of God would call again. It never did. The distance between heaven and earth had become a chasm, and yet God had not abandoned them. The garments they wore, the animal skins God had made, were more than protection. They were a sign. Though sin had entered the world, mercy had entered too. Eve often touched the garment when she prayed, whispering through tears, "You still see us, don't you?" She couldn't hear his answer, but she could feel it in the stillness, in the wind, in the flickering of light that never seemed to fully fade. As time passed, life began to grow again. One morning, Adam saw a tiny green sprout pushing through the soil. He smiled for the first time since Eden. "Life," he murmured, "even now." Eve knelt beside him, touching the sprout with trembling fingers. "He said the ground would be cursed," she whispered, "but still, it grows." Adam nodded. Maybe that is his way of reminding us death won't have the final word. The words were simple, but prophetic. And then, the first birth. Eve cried out in pain, clutching her belly as Adam tried to comfort her. The agony was unlike anything either of them had known. Her body trembled, her voice broke, and through the suffering, through the tears, a child was born. The first child ever to take breath outside paradise. When Eve held the infant in her arms, she sobbed, not just from pain, but from awe. "I have brought forth a man, with the help of the Lord." She named him Cain. Later came another son, Abel. As the children grew, the world around them grew too. Trees bore fruit again. Rivers carved new paths. The wind carried both song and sorrow. The beauty of creation still lingered, but it was now marked by the shadow of sin. For even as life blossomed, death had entered the world, quietly at first, a withered leaf, a fallen bird, and then, one day, a sickness that took one of the smaller creatures they had cared for. Eve buried it in the soil and wept, realizing for the first time what death truly meant. "This is what he meant," she whispered to Adam. "When he said we would die." Adam placed a hand on her shoulder. "And yet, we still live." "Why?" she asked, looking to the heavens. "Why spare us?" Adam didn't know the answer, but deep in his heart he remembered the words God had spoken in Eden. The seed of the woman will crush the serpent's head. A promise, a future. It became the hope they clung to, the thread that kept them from despair. Years passed. The children grew. Cain, strong and restless, Abel, quiet and gentle. Adam taught them to till the soil, to care for the animals, to offer thanks to the Creator who still watched from afar. And though God no longer walked with them as before, his presence was not gone. Sometimes, in the stillness of the evening, they could feel him distant, but near enough to stir their souls. Eve would tell her sons stories of Eden, of light that never dimmed, of peace that knew no fear. "We once walked with him," she'd say softly, "face to face." Abel would listen with wonder. Cain, with bitterness. "Why did he cast you out?" Cain asked once, his voice hard. "If he's so good, why not forgive?" Eve's eyes filled with tears. "He did forgive," she said. "That's why we still breathe." But sin, it changed everything. Cain turned away, unsatisfied. The seed of rebellion still lingered. The same whisper that once spoke through the serpent now echoed faintly in the hearts of men. One night, as the stars burned high, Adam stood at the edge of a cliff, looking toward the east. The flaming sword still flickered faintly, marking the border of Eden. He spoke softly into the wind. "I remember your voice," he said. "The sound of your footsteps in the garden, the warmth of your presence. I failed you. But if the promise still stands, if redemption still lives, then let it come. Let it come through my sons, or my sons' sons." The wind stirred a soft whisper, like a memory, and though no words were spoken, Adam knew he was heard. The world had changed forever. Sin had entered. Death had taken root. But even in the ruin, grace was already at work. The same God who clothed them in mercy had sown a seed of hope, a promise that one day, through another child born of woman, the serpent would be crushed and the curse undone. Eve, holding her children close beneath the stars, whispered a prayer into the night. "Lord, if not in my lifetime, then in theirs, let the promise come." Far above, the heavens remained silent, but deep in the heart of eternity, the plan for redemption had already begun, a plan that would one day lead to a manger, a cross, and an empty tomb. The story of the fall was not just about loss. It was the beginning of the greatest rescue the world would ever know. Part 6. The long shadow of sin, and the hope that remains. Years turned into decades. Decades into generations. The world that had once been a garden of light was now a land of labor, sweat, and sorrow. Humanity had multiplied, building homes, cities, and altars, but the shadow of Eden never left them. Every man and woman carried a faint memory. They could not explain a longing for something they could no longer touch. The curse had done more than taint the soil. It had seeped into the heart. Cain and Abel grew into men, sons of the same parents, but different in spirit. Cain worked the ground, coaxing life from stubborn earth. Abel tended flocks, gentle and faithful. Each, in his own way, sought to honor the God their parents had spoken of. One morning, they brought offerings. Cain offered the fruit of his labor, the crops he had grown with sweat and pride. Abel brought a lamb, pure and spotless, and offered it with humility. And God looked with favor on Abel's offering, but not on Cain's. It wasn't about the gift itself. It was about the heart. Abel's sacrifice came from faith. Cain's from pride. But pride cannot bear rejection. In the silence of that moment, something dark awoke in Cain, something that had been waiting since the garden. The serpent's whisper still echoed. Even now, you deserve more. You are better. Why should he choose your brother over you? Cain's jaw tightened. His hands clenched. Rage, jealousy, and shame twisted together inside him, until it became something else, something unrecognizable. Later, in the field, Abel came to him, smiling. "Brother," he began, but he never finished the sentence. Cain struck him down. The earth that had once been cursed to bear thorns now drank blood for the first time. Abel's blood, and from the heavens came a voice that pierced to stillness. "Cain, where is your brother?" Cain trembled but answered with defiance. "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" The question hung in the air cold, hollow, and God replied, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries to me from the ground." Then came judgment, not the same as Adam's, but born of the same brokenness. Cain was marked, not for death, but for memory. The first murderer carried a sign that no one could touch him yet. He would wander the earth, forever restless, forever searching for peace he would never find. The shadow of sin had lengthened. Adam and Eve buried their son with trembling hands. One child lost to death, another lost to exile. Eve wept until her voice broke. "I thought the seed would come from him," she cried. "I thought the promise would begin with Abel." Adam held her close, eyes fixed on the sky. "Maybe it still will," he sighed softly. "Maybe not through him, but through another. And in time, another son was born, Seth. Eve named him with trembling hope. "For God has granted me another child in place of Abel," she said. "For Cain killed him, and through Seth's line, the promise lived on. Generations passed. Men built towers, raised kingdoms, and sought power. But sin followed them like a shadow. The more they built, the further they fell. Violence filled the earth. Greed replaced gratitude. The image of God, once radiant in men, was now cracked, distorted. Yet, through the corruption, there remained flickers of faith. Men like Enoch, who walked with God and was taken before death could touch him. Men like Noah, who found grace when the world was drowning in evil. God's plan of redemption had not been forgotten. It had only begun to unfold. But the question lingered through generations. Could the curse ever be undone? From Adam to Noah, from Noah to Abraham, from Abraham to David, and beyond humanity waited. They carried the stories, passed them from father to son, mother to daughter. Once we walked with God. Once we fell. But one day He will make it right again. And centuries later, when the world had almost forgotten the promise, it came quietly, not through fire or thunder, but through the cry of a child, born of a woman, in a stable, not a palace. Under the same stars that once watched over Eden, the serpent's lie had met its match. The seed of the woman had come. He would live as Adam should have lived, blameless, obedient, without sin. He would die as no man ever had, innocent, but willingly. And in that death, the curse would finally begin to break. For on a hill far from the garden, another tree would stand. Not the tree of knowledge, but the cross. And from it, redemption would flow like living water. But in the time of Adam, that day was still far off. He lived 930 years, watching his children's children fill the earth, some faithful, some lost. And when his time came, he lay beside Eve, beneath the same soil they once tilled in sorrow. Before he closed his eyes for the last time, Eve whispered, "Do you think we'll ever see him again?" Adam smiled faintly. "Yes," he said. "He promised, and he never breaks his word." The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, just a moment, it sounded like the footsteps of God walking in the garden once more. The story of the fall is not merely the story of Sanit. It's the story of grace that refused to end. From Eden's perfection to humanity's rebellion, from the curse to the promise, every shadow pointed toward the dawn. For those sin entered through one man, redemption would come through another. And one day, when the world is made new, the garden will return. Not as it was, but as it was always meant to be. The gates of Eden will open again. The tree of life will bloom, and the voice that once asked, "Where are you?" will whisper once more, "Welcome home."